All right, last video. I've done too many videos in a row, and this is not good, but got to get it done. Right, okay, this video is about government responses to, or solutions to positive externalities of production. And we're going to look at subsidies, and we're going to look at advertising, campaigns, legislation, to make the consumption of the good increase. That's what we want to do. We want to increase it to Q star. So the first thing we could do, we could offer a subsidy. And again, you've got two diagrams to do that. You've got a normal micro diagram, which might be easier, might come more easily to you in the exam. And we could add a subsidy there, push it downwards. So S plus sub, and that's going to result in your quantity rising from Q1 to Q2. That's good because you go further toward Q star. Remember, it's a positive externality of consumption, which is under-consumed. And you're putting the price down as well. So that's good for consumers, particularly poor consumers whose real incomes will increase. It's going to be a cost to the government though, and you're going to see that there with X, Y, and Z. So you've got your Y there and your Z there, and your total cost to the government being all of that lot there, which is a lot of money. Okay, so as we said there, price falls, quantity of healthcare rises, moves us closer to the socially optimal equilibrium. Now you could say for the government, they've subsidised it to a point where, well, I suppose that they're producing it themselves, and that's essentially a subsidy to the point where the price of the good is zero. And so in the UK, we go all the way to the bottom of the demand curve there, and we get a zero price, I suppose P3, which is because the government thinks that healthcare has such a positive benefit externality for society, possibly for productivity of firms, for example, or the amount of income tax that people pay as a result of being healthy. We could also do the same thing, but on this diagram, and I think for this one, I'm going to push it all the way to that point there. That's going to be MPC plus subsidy. Some of you asked in the lesson, well, why doesn't MSC pull down? Well, MSC includes the cost of third parties, and again, the cost of the third party here is still going to be to the taxpayer for having to pay for it. So MSC isn't, I don't think, technically going to shift down, but you are going to see MPC shifting down. And the important thing here is that we get to Q star, and that's going to mean that our Q2 is going to be there, is now going to be our free market equilibrium. Q2 is now going to equal Q star at a much lower price P2. So you can use either of those diagrams. I quite like the right-hand diagram, but again, I realise it is difficult to draw, and in an exam, if you're panicked, it might not be the best choice. So just choose judiciously between the two. You can still get full marks from the left-hand diagram. The positive effects of the subsidy, therefore, will be that you've reduced or eliminated that market failure, and you've now got to the point of the correct amount of output where you're going to maximise social surplus, and therefore allocative efficiency is going to be achieved. Negatives, obviously, the opportunity cost. The nice thing about that is you could link to that diagram there, and you could talk about that. The good might be inelastic, which might mean that actually you're going to need a very large subsidy in order to get you to Q star. You may not know where Q star is as well. And other policies might be cheaper or more effective. You might make the point, though, that you could subsidise this through the tax from cigarettes, for example. So in the UK, we tax cigarettes, we take part of that tax income, and we subsidise healthcare with it. So that might be one solution for lowering the opportunity cost for the government. Now, you could also use a subsidy for a negative externality of production. So you could choose to subsidise wind power, and a subsidy on wind power is going to reduce the demand for coal-fired electricity. So you can see, you could just do a simple diagram there for your coal power, and that again is reducing that demand there, reducing the quantity going forward towards Q star because it's a negative externality of production. Now, if you're really clever, you could put that onto an externality diagram as well, shifting MPB to the left, but I think maybe that's too far for us today, but it is possible if you wanted to look at how that works. Our final policy is looking at advertising campaigns or legislation. Now, both of these do the same thing. The aim is to increase the demand for the product. So you could do this diagram here, which raises the demand for the product. I wouldn't really get too caught up about the price rising. I don't think that's too important. But the key thing here is that you're getting more quantity of fruit being bought and sold. That's the important thing. Now, the effect of that is that, well, your MPB is going to be shifting to the right. And so you would do this instead. Now, this is quite difficult, plus advertising. Now, if you're using legislation, you'd say plus legislation. It depends on which policy you're talking about. So adverts increase the demand for merit goods. There is a campaign in the UK for 5 a day, your 5 a day fruit and vegetables, letting people know, because there may be asymmetric information in the market. You may not realise just how much of a great merit good this is. And so this shifts your demand for the product to the right. And your free market equilibrium is nearer to the socially optimal equilibrium, or it gets to it. You might get halfway, like we did before, or you might get all the way, as we've shown there. The legislation, because we haven't really talked about that, that could be, for example, forcing people to go to school. So it could be something called a mandate. A mandate is you're essentially forcing someone to do something. So that could be a COVID vaccine. You force people to get a vaccine, or you force people to go to school up to the age of 16 or up to the age of 18 or whatever it might be. Those kind of legislative policies are really only used for things which the government think are very, very important. Interestingly, legislation has been used in China, for example, for the one-child policy. I suppose you could claim that a second child has a negative externality, and as a result you limit that. Anyway, I haven't thought of that before, but that's an interesting one. Positive effects of this, that you might address your information gaps. You might have information gaps, so that would address the actual problem involved, and again it reduces market failure. It doesn't have a negative effect on, actually it has a positive effect on the company as well, because they increase their revenue from it. So it's not like a tax in this sense, and it's also not negatively affecting the government. So there's no negative, well, I've got myself confused there. There is an opportunity at cost to the government from having to provide the advertising campaign. Legislation, you don't. I mean, it's less of a cost to the government there. But certainly this is going to be cheaper than offering a subsidy. Problem, it might not be effective. You don't know really what the effect of any campaign is going to be. It could go viral on social media, or it could just, everyone could just ignore it. So it really does depend. And again, yes, that opportunity cost to the government is certainly there as well. Okay, so that, if you were doing an essay on promoting goods with positive externalities, that's the way I would do it. I would do 2 diagrams, I'd do a subsidy, and I would also do something of this nature here, legislation advertising campaign. But the key thing here is, I think, is to get a really good examples, some really good examples. COVID vaccines at the moment, I think, are really good examples of this at the moment. Okay, thanks for listening. Hopefully that wasn't too long.